Well, greetings everybody. It's been a little bit longer since my previous uploaded video than I thought. I anticipated being off work for several months due to the depressed oil prices, and as things turned out, I was asked to return to work, I think within a day or two of uploading the last video that I put up, and so I've been working ever since, and it's been very busy, uh, keeping me occupied all day, pretty much every day. And although I've done a lot of reading, obviously I've done a lot of thinking too. And the way that my job works is at the end of every well that we drill, I fill out a whole bunch of paperwork indicating how many days I worked, any invoices that I need, any mileage, any reimbursements that I need, and I forward that to my employer, to my boss. And I was doing that today, and I was, just struck. It was only a couple $1,000s for the week, and I was really very distraught by this. And it got me thinking about why I've had to resort to, living in a hotel like this, um, making all this money, reading books, which I've read several books since I've been here, which is, really hampered my humanity in a lot of ways. And I was just really struck by the destitution of my situation, and I couldn't help but wonder, what has happened that has brought me to this point in my life that you know I'm making this money, and I don't even know how to spend it, and I'm able to live, and I have to live in a place like this where maids come and do all my laundry, and this climate control and TVs, and I mean it's it's been really awful. And so I was thinking about it, and the first and foremost, I have to blame is my boss. Now I work for my boss now for 6, 7 years. I've only met him once, and that was last year, so or about 6 months ago. So 5 to 6 years into our relationship, our partnership, or rather into his exploitation of my labor. And he lives in Texas, and even though he has no measurable effect on the surroundings of my life and the towns that I've lived in, the states that I've lived, in the way I've run my life, he's basically coerced me. I mean, when they called me to come out here, they said, would you like to come out? We really need you. This is a delicate situation. Everything's very tight right now, and we would really appreciate you, because when we want something done correctly, we call you, we want you, which, by the way, is insulting and demeaning to my humanity, right? I feel like a worthless piece of shit to know that some capitalist pig wants me to work for him, and is just going to pay me several times the amount of money he's going to make in the same, process. That that right there is very, very upsetting. It's completely inappropriate that uh, he should make me feel that way, that he should say those things, those respectful things, like he has any business. It's his fault that I have to work anyway. If it wasn't for my boss, I would have to do nothing. I could just sit in luxury forever, not working, having grapes fed to me, with a giant peacock fan gently wafting incensed air over my you know oiled body. That's what my life would be like if it wasn't for my boss, pretty much. And the pittance, the scraps that he allows me to have, and he has complete arbitrary control over that. I mean, he could pay me pennies a day easily. There'd be nothing preventing him from doing that. I would have no choice but to accept that, because completely he has complete totalitarian control over the rest of my life, and I have no other option. It's work for him or starve, literally. There are no other alternatives that exist. And so, even though I'm not starving, and I spent a lot of my time shopping for expensive Australian underwear, and books and music, I would be starving if it wasn't for him, and that's kind of pushed me into this position, this deplorable, awful position that nobody, if they had a free choice, would ever choose. Now, the other problem, the other thing that's really fucked up about this situation, that's probably almost just as responsible as my boss, is the enclosure movement. If it wasn't for the enclosure movement, and I know this because I read it on a left-wing blog before I got a job when I was still in college. Um, I'd never worked before, but I learned this before I ever actually had a job. I became an expert on labor and the power dynamics between workers and employees. I learned all that before I even had a job because I read it on left-wing blogs from workers who work in public sector unions, who have perfect understanding of market economies and how employee-employer relationships work. It is all because of the enclosure movement. It's March. It's been cold. We got several inches of snow here before, when I first arrived. It's just now starting to get a little bit warm, but there's no buds, there's no green grass. And I guarantee, without any hesitation, that I would rather be a subsistence farmer on my own parcel of land right now, or a parcel of land collectively owned with, several people who are identical and equal to me in every way, both in their desires and their abilities. There is no way I would ever agree to make thousands of dollars per week wage laboring if I could instead be trying to conserve calories in my root cellar, hoping for the first harvest, at the end of May, early June. Maybe uh, scouring the first buds as they come up, and they're not really ripe yet. But after 6 months, you've got to do what you've got to do. There's just no way I would choose to do this if that was an option. And it's not an option, really. I mean, it is. I could do that, but it would be easier if all land was unowned as opposed to so much of it being owned. Uh, the enclosure of the land, the fact that the power of the state has been used to enforce private interests, is the only reason that I'm in the exchanging for wage labor. It's the only reason, because, and we can see this historically. I mean, if you go back in the history of the United States to when land was not enclosed, when it was pretty much freely available, either illegally or illegally, nobody worked in wage labor. There were no jobs. No people, came exchange their labor for wages. It was unheard of. It never existed until all land was monopolized by millions of individual owners, right? Until tens of millions of individual owners monopolized land, there was no wage labor. None. And who would choose that? Who would choose, a life of immediate gratification, of receiving monetary income, remuneration, without any investment, without any risk in capital accumulation, without any, completely insulated from the, peculiarities of local climate conditions. I would much rather my survival, or if not my survival, at least my prosperity, be entirely dependent on the weather conditions and the soil conditions of a couple acres of land in a very specific place, because that is the most insurance, the most safety you can possibly have in this world. All right, because I mean, there's no way my farm could ever fail. Now, granted, it's not that subsistence farming is the only thing I could do. I could become an entrepreneur. And, again, everyone knows that all entrepreneurs become successful millionaires. All you have to do is become a capitalist and you become rich. You just sit at a desk and do nothing and you are rich. You just order people to do things and money just piles up. It's the easiest thing in the world. I mean, everyone knows it, right? Capitalists do no work. They take no risk. They have no initiative. They don't discover, uh, goods and services that people need and provide them. No, that they just give orders and they become wealthy. And indeed, I would do that were it not for the enclosure movement. And I would surely succeed were it not for the enclosure movement and private property generally. I mean, private property and land especially. Obviously, land should be unowned. I mean, of all the possibilities, the most desirable is that all land is unowned. and that it only falls to people who are directly using it. So, granted, it might sound a little weird, but if I have a subsistence farm, it's not really mine. It belongs to quote unquote the community. And if I, become invalid for some reason or leave to go visit somebody or fall asleep or whatever else, obviously then the land should revert to whoever else wants to claim it. That system would work extremely well. It always has. I mean, it always has. Private property and land is this new thing that only came about, with the flowering of capitalist civilization, and of course there was plenty. I mean, before the Industrial Revolution, everybody basically lived like a king because we had communal ownership and there was no profit, and everybody, nobody owned everything, so everyone owned everything, and it was like we were all on the world, and we were all like super rich. And then the enclosure movement happened, and private property, which was invented by John Locke, pretty much came into existence. John Locke and Ayn Rand, I mean, they worked together to conspire to bring this about, and uh, land became owned, and it screwed up. Now, the other option that's almost as good is that nobody owns the land except for one institution that has complete control over everything. Now, that institution would definitely not be a state. States are bad because they could enforce private property and capitalism, which would that's what's put us here in this position in the first place. Um, and so this institution that has complete control over everything would not be a state. It would be a benign institution that would be altruistic, that maybe not utopian, but it would be optimal. It would do nothing but work for the benefit of everyone else. Um, as long as we instituted democracy, if you have a majority vote for such an institution, then it's syllogistically correct and will make the best decisions. Because voters, by definition, are aware of the optimal conditions and actions that should be taken on all pieces of property throughout the world, right? It's just that obvious. But all that's a side issue. So the enclosure movement and private property generally, that's another problem that's forced me into this terrible condition. The situation that is so abysmally awful that, you know, sleeping tonight on the feather bed that next to me as I watch TV and read a book is going to cause me to have, you know, it's going to perturb some of my sleep. I mean, there's no way around it. Um, the other problem with it, you know, it seems nice. Oh, your boss is offering you money. He's giving me all these thousands of dollars, but it's all tainted because it's conditional, right? He won't give me the money for no reason. He won't just give it to me for free. He asks in return that I give him my labor. This, of course, makes it coercion, right? Like everyone knows that a better system would be to receive whatever you want unconditionally. That would be better, right? And that would work a lot better. You could just get whatever you want or whatever you need unconditionally, and then of course you would have all this free time, and you could volunteer, and whatever you volunteer, that would actually be what produces everything that everyone else is demanding. This system is so patently obviously superior to what we have now, that I don't see how everyone hasn't adopted it already. And anyone who does not adopt that ideology is thinking within the box, is a tool, an unwitting tool of the capitalist marketing empire. So, and that's the other thing. One of the reasons, and I neglected to mention this. Capitalists automatically will make money. They will become millionaires because of marketing. Marketing has the power to force people to pay for your product. You don't have to have a good product or a good service. All you have to do is pay for commercials, and you will automatically make a profit. Automatically, because people are blank slates. They can be manipulated so easily. All you have to do is uh, use some discredited tabula rasa stuff from the 30s, and you can convince people to buy anything, and you'll become a millionaire. And everyone does this. I mean, that's all capitalists ever do, right? And the rest of us are just too pure-hearted to sink to that level. So yeah, the granting, there's no incentive problem. People talk about that. There's no incentive problem if uh, you grant things unconditionally. And of course, history is full of examples of unconditionally provided goods and services. All right, like if you work in a commune, for instance, that's not conditional. You don't have to work there. You just can live, and you'll get whatever. You'll get to divide the product of the commune amongst all of you, all the people there. And if you don't work, they'll still give it to you. And so it's unconditional. And of course, if they did put conditions, if they said, well, in order to get the profit, if you're going to share in the wealth of our commune, you need to work for it. Well, they would never say that, because that would be conditional, right? They would be putting a condition on your getting remuneration. And of course, that would make them exactly the same as a capitalist in terms of, the coerciveness of their remuneration, of course. So that's obviously not going to happen. Um, and of course, you know, it is true that my boss makes money. It's true. He makes money, and I make money too. Now, as it happens, I make more money than he does on a given job. Uh, but he did buy all the equipment. He did take out the necessary loans. He filed the contracts. He made the contacts. He negotiated with the people that we provide the goods and services for. He found the location. He provided. When I go, there's an office sitting there for me. There's computers and laptops. There's equipment without which I could not do the job that I do. And this is, of course, all to say that he has no right to anything, right? That he's exploiting me. I didn't have to invest anything, any time, any resources, none at all, uh, and that's why I should get everything. And the fraction of the input of the income that goes to him is stolen from me. It's and obviously, as a capitalist, as the person who took the risk of buying all that, who took out loans or saved up to buy, he has no right to get a return on that capital. None at all. None at all. And this would be true also if we were to start a communal factory together. Say 20 people got together and said, let's all save up and we'll start a factory together. And of course, they may have to defer their consumption for a long time. I mean, to build a factory from the labors of a single person, that's difficult, especially if you're going to produce very much. So maybe for a year or two, you live only on half as much as you're actually earning, and you invest in that factory. Now, if at some point the people who work in that factory, if the um, personnel change because one of the original people, say, got sick and died, or decided that they didn't want to do that, they wanted to go someplace else, or say you decided you needed to hire somebody else, and the new replacement people have not invested anything into that company or factory, have put no savings into it, who have not spent years and years, ferreting away little bits of money, those people will obviously be entitled to exactly the same amount of remuneration as the original investors, right? Obviously, because if we didn't do that, if we didn't make all workers equal, then there's going to be an investor capitalist class, which is inherently coercive. All right, those workers who started that factory together, when they offered a job to another worker, they were coercing them, unless they divide everything equally. Everything needs to be equal, and they can't get a return on their investment. That return has to be spread even to people who didn't make any investment. Does that make sense? That should be pretty obvious to anyone who's read a left-wing blog. All right, that's the way it should be, and there is no incentive problem there. The workers are still going to go and do that. Workers will still defer consumption. They will still live at a lower standard of living for protracted periods and take great risks, if not in their survival, at the very least in their prosperity, just so they can have the same amount of return as somebody who doesn't do those things, who just gets the job. I mean, even though there's radically more risk involved, that will have no effect on whether or not people do it. And so all these are reasons why I'm really, really upset with being a wage laborer. It has provided me with income. Sure, I have more money than I can spend. Sure, I have more precious metals than I can lift. Sure, I have lots of luxury goods that 30 years ago no one could even imagine. That I live better than a king would have 100 years ago or 200 years ago or at any point. Um, but I have been coerced because my boss, even though he made no volitional act to deny me, Eden. It's not his fault that I don't live in the Garden of Eden, but he's still coercing me because he's only giving me an option. When I walk down the street as a consumer and I see somebody who is offering me the option of buying something, say, some fruit, that person is coercing me. They are coercing me because they are giving me an option of something that I might like, and I may not like it. I may like it. They're giving me an option. They're increasing the number of things I could do by one alternative. However, since I can't have whatever I want for free, even though that is not their fault, they are coercing me by giving me the option. This is so obviously clear to me. I don't know where people get lost in the logic here. If somebody, we don't have, it's true, we don't have infinite options. I mean, it might be such a huge number that we can't count it, but we don't have infinite options, right? And so when someone offers you one more option, that they're denying you the infinity of opportunity. I mean, and I resent my boss all the time for that. It's his fault, even though we never met. The reason I wasn't able to just, like I said, lay on a silk pillow, getting fed grapes, that's his fault. That is his fault. And because he's offering money, but only conditionally, only if I cooperate with him in providing a good and service to other people. And let me tell you, like, there is nothing worse, nothing at all. Now, this is a sorry, sorry state for humanity. And I think all we need to realize that the way to solve this is to vote. If we can just get a majority of people, a majority, because majorities are syllogistically correct. If a majority of people vote for something, they are right. And it's also true that uh, when people vote, I mean, it's amazing. Ballots convey vastly more information than market transactions do. Vastly more. When you vote for a politician, they know what you want. I mean, they understand when you vote. I vote for Barack Obama, for instance. He knows what's in your heart, what you want. He knows what programs you're interested in, which ones you want to see carried out, and how you want them to be carried out, and how you want him to behave as a representative on your behalf. They know those things. I mean, obviously, direct democracy would is similar in the sense that um, you know everything that needs to be done. You understand all the property, all the goods, all the factories, all the technical details of everything. Everyone understands all of that equally, and so it makes perfect sense for them to then vote on everything. And there would be no logistical challenge whatsoever. All we need is a clicker, and then we could just be voting on every decision that affects everybody else. Well, we'd only be voting on the decisions that affect you, but since everything does kind of affect everyone, at least to some degree, we would have to be voting on everything. But just adding representatives, that doesn't really change that, because they become the vessel of all of that wisdom, right? All that knowledge, the fact that we're going to vote on it, that's creates this metaphysical genius, this wisdom that they can then tap into. And when you vote for a politician, they know what it is that you want. Exactly. They don't take your vote as a license to do whatever the hell they want. They don't view it like that. They can tell when you vote for them what you really want, and then of course they can weigh, the. I mean, and there's of course unanimity, right, in the electorate. I mean, it's not really, but whatever the majority says is correct. So if there's a minority view, it's, I mean, obviously wrong. It's the fewer people voted for it, so it's wrong, obviously. So there's no coercion there. There's no question of right or wrong because of majority votes. I mean, it's so obvious. Everything that is democratic is, ipso facto correct. You know, and all decisions and all goods and all property needs to be, I mean, for utilitarian and for moral reasons, needs to be subjected to an absolute democratic process of the entire world. I mean, it would not be fair to have tiny little electorates, with their own narrow vision of what's right or wrong. There's no reason to support that. The more votes, the better. The bigger the the community, the better. I mean, there's some libertarians who believe in the autonomy of the individual, but almost as bad are like these leftists who believe in the autonomy of 100-person or 10-person groups. There is no reason to assert that those units are the units on which all society should be based. It should be everybody, because your little 10-person factory that pays all workers the same, even if the ones didn't invest, and doesn't care about markets and doesn't care about prices and makes every decision based on voting and has no leaders and everyone is the same and blah blah blah. They know what's their votes would count for more and be more useful if they were also voting for everything else, right? So, and I don't get to vote for my job. I mean, I can quit. I can tell them I don't want to work anymore. I mean, I would start if I stop working for them. Eventually, I will die of old age, and I could starve if I never got another job or did anything else. Which, of course, I don't have those options. I mean, between me and Texas, there are literally no other jobs I could possibly get. None, none. It's impossible. It's impossible. And so I am faced with that dilemma that if I don't work for them, I will starve. And so he's coercing me, and I don't get to vote. If I got to vote and they voted to have me starve, well, majority vote, then that would be okay. But his offering me this option to make money and to travel the world and to buy things and live in comfort and blah blah blah, like, who wants any of that? And who are you, like, if I'm happy, I mean, I've heard of other people. This isn't me, of course. I've heard of other people who are happy with theirs. They say it's voluntary and they agree with it. And of course, their opinion of whether they're being coerced or whether what they're doing is in their own best interest is irrelevant. Their opinion doesn't matter on that. Only my opinion matters on that. If they're doing a job that I would not do, then they shouldn't do it either. If they're working for a wage that I would not accept, then they should not work for that wage because I said so. Because my values are universal and apply to everybody. All right. So if some kid is working for less money than I would work for the job that he's doing. I mean, one time I was in a mall and these marketers came up and they asked me if I would watch a movie preview. And if I would watch it, they would ask me these questions. And the movie was the new Dumb and Dumber movie. And they would ask me, like, will I watch this movie? If so, why not? And of course, I told them I will not watch this movie because Jim Carrey is in it. And Jim Carrey is a horrible hypocrite when it comes to gun rights. And I said that repeatedly. And then when I left, they gave me $2. And I said, 20 minutes of my time is not worth fucking $2, and I never went there again. Now, because that's the right choice, right? Nobody should be forced, and by forced I mean asked politely, take it or leave it, to go watch Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber and then get paid for it. And so all those people should be prevented. Anyone who makes the decision to do that is wrong, has made an error. They have made a mistake. And it is correct for somebody else to stop them. I mean, to penalize the person giving them the money, first of all, they're the most guilty. But also just to deny them that option. Because the person who's giving them an option to have a job or to buy a product for that matter, they're coercing them. But the person who prevents them from making that decision, they're not coercing them. They're liberating them. They're liberating them by taking away their autonomy and their options. That is, freedom. Freedom is to live by my preferences for everybody else. And of course, when I vote for a politician, he has my same preferences. I know that every issue that I believe in, that Barack Obama also shares those exact same views. I know because I voted for him. And he knows because he received my vote what my preferences are. And he is going to run the government based on those preferences. I just feel it in my bones. And I know that everyone else who voted for him has the same preferences, right? And I am going to support everything that he does and the government that he runs because I know that it's going to enforce all of my own personal preferences, which are not personal. I mean, when I say I don't want to work for under $5 an hour to watch Jeff Daniels commercials, that is like a metaphysical, philosophical, ethical absolute that everyone is bound by punishment of the state to accept and to obey, and that's just how it needs to be. So anyway, hopefully my indentured servitude to my evil corporate masters, fat cats, will end soon enough, and I'll be able to talk about something more important, like football.